Hello.
Okay, can
Hello.
you hear now?
Hello.
Okay, we can hear now. Okay, good.
Okay, great. All right. So yeah, so I didn't say anything, but okay, so first slide is just about me. So right now I am currently a USC Game Arts sophomore, and I have a pretty big passion for game dev. So I've been working with, I guess, indie devs since high school, and those are just a couple um indie games that I guess I kind of helped work on. I wasn't really part of the team. I just kind of freelanced for them. But yeah, and then some other experience. So yeah, so basically I'll say probably my quote unquote, biggest job experience so far within the field of games is that I was a concept artist at this place called Hidden Leaf Games from 2020 to 2023. So fun fact, I'm supposed to be technically my age wise, I'm supposed to be a senior, but because I was spending some time over at that company, I I took 2 years off, so now I've downgraded to sophomore. But yeah, so and then like while I was working there, I did end up helping ship the first title, just called Fanes. So yeah, and then just also I just happen to be a world building visual development fan. Probably see some of you guys at Visual Narrative Society after this club. And as you can see from that picture of me, I really like Pokemon, so there you go. All right. And then oh yeah, so I guess this is still just about me. So this is actually a company. This is when we went to Cancun, Mexico, actually, in 2022. See if you could spot me there. Amongst I think that's about like 40 something people. Yeah, it's a bit big for oh, yeah, are you sure I'm not are you sure I'm not one of the other 10 Asian guys?
I'm sure that's you.
Oh well, if in case you're still searching. Oh, whoops. There I am. Well, oh yeah. Anyways, so I don't know why I did that. So yeah, so basically, and then just I'm assuming none of you guys have heard of the that game that I mentioned called Fanes. So basically, I guess my role at Hidden Leaf Games was well, I was one of the original dozen development team members. It kind of started off really small, and I joined early somehow. And mostly what I did was character design and skin design. So, in case you don't know what skin is, it's basically like a personalization sort of outfit for the character that people could spend their money to buy. And we set out to do quite literally the impossible, which is conquer the mobile market. Unfortunately, it did not really go very well. Um, because we're trying to compete with fucking League of Legends at this point. So, uh, yeah, I mean, okay, that's a bit of like a trailer, kind of. I guess it's like only like 45 seconds, so I guess I'll play it.
Oh, I don't know if you got sound shared, but it's not
Well, I heard the Discord thing. Oh, that did not work. That's just my work. What is going on? What is going on? Where's my mouse? Oh, sorry about this. Oh, yeah, let me see if I could just get that video to play. Potentially. If it doesn't, then I guess I'll just move on. Please work. Please. Oh, well, why did that happen?
What?
Oh,
Wait.
it took you to the link.
Alpha G. Yeah, unfortunately, YouTube is really cracking down on those ads, so I gotta really.
No, because then they're gonna increase the CPU by like a million.
Oh my god, that's so crusty. Oh yeah, so it's like a bit of an animated trailer kind of thing. That's not the frame rate of the actual thing, but yeah, it's basically like a top-down kind of game. It's yeah, it's just some bunch of characters, I guess. That's definitely not as real. Yeah. Okay. All right. Take a wild guess who voiced that character.
No way, you.
Unfortunately, not. Where did the shit? Where did the
You gotta move that down. The UI down.
how do I do that?
You just click on like
Ah. Okay, well,
and then no problem. You have to move it up again.
shit. I'm sorry, I don't know why my amazing $2,000 gaming laptop is acting like this. Oh shoot, where's my presenter notes? Come on, sorry, sorry about this. My presenter notes are now gone. I'll never play another YouTube video again. I'm sorry. Okay. Please. 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 There you go. Is it good now? Thank you. Okay, shit. This is so janky. Also, why is it not completely full screen? Whatever. Anyways, at this point, so yeah, so basically this is just some of my work. Basically the top two were for the for the game. Yeah, that's like a those are that's like a mount concept for like the game where you could sit on it as play and ride into battle. Those are actually modeled after actual corgis that were in our that were owned by other my colleagues. And yeah, I mean that's so yeah, just taste of my work. But anyways, enough about me. So here is so yeah, what is character design? So, character design, I mean, I'm pretty sure, I mean, I don't really need to give that much of an explanation or intro to all you guys, but basically, if you're not familiar with it, it's basically the process of creating characters for use in entertainment, such as film and games. And here I have kind of like a list of basically like kind of breaking down what like every character is made up of. So they have each character always has a style, a shape, a costume, story, and a personality. Uh, and you know, some of these are basically like I'll consider kind of like strong pillars of every character. And um, I guess one thing to point out is that the style is something that like every game or every like artist, I would say, would have their own style, but the strength of the other four are usually dependent on, I guess, your knowledge and your skill as an artist. So you know, so basically, yeah, that's and then also I kind of broke it down further where basically shape and costume will be more of the visual elements of a character design, and then story and personality will be more of the narrative elements. So I'll kind of be referring back to these later throughout the presentation. So yeah, I mean, of course, if you read the definitions, it's basically like I mean, yeah, that's very much feel like if you think about any character, you know, you could probably like identify what each of these different pillars would be for them. So first off with style. So basically, this is kind of like you've probably seen something like this before, but basically, it's like kind of you know every game is gonna have a range of different styles, going from more stylized to realistic. So I just took some examples here, probably some games like from this like most stylized. It usually is dependent on kind of how cartoony, I guess, or how like realistic some of the characters are kind of drawn in terms of proportions. So you can tell in stylized, it's very like unrealistic. And then realistic is obviously, why did I say it like that? Basically, stylized is more like simplified, and realistic is very much more detailed. So usually this is established by the game's art director, so you would kind of know you know what kind of style you have to work with, and each game again has its own style. But it's also a good idea to, I guess, cater to a specific style of your own, but don't limit yourself too much though, because I know that like I'm pretty sure you probably heard this advice if you're making portfolio is that you have to or you wouldn't say you have to, but it would be a good idea to kind of know what kind of company you want to go for. Like if you want to obviously work for Riot Games, you want to go for maybe not something too realistic. So maybe somewhere kind of like in the middle ground. Basically, you know, you just want to do some more studying before you start doing things like applying to jobs and whatnot. And then for the so yeah, that's basically style. And then these are I kind of broke down, I guess, more of like some other pillars of good character design. So obviously what I mentioned earlier with like the different like style, shape, personality, story, whatnot. Those are what all characters have, but these are more like kind of what I've sort of found to be like what a very strong character design does very well is in these different categories. So the first thing is invoking a certain read. So basically, what is this design for, right? And that's where you always want to start, because when you first come with design, you want to be like, okay, you want to like, so these are characters from a game called Omega Strikers. I'm not sure if you've heard of that game before, but it's like, I would say like they do a pretty good job in terms of their roster diversity and their designs. So as you could tell, like, this big hamster guy over here is clearly he's gonna like read as being like, okay, maybe very strong, very tanky, but also being like kind of soft and maybe like not super serious, more like whimsical. So that's something that you want to make sure like when you're designing a character, you want to follow what you want the character to read as. So that way, you don't end up making them like, because if the whole idea is like maybe this guy's personality is very soft, but if you make him like really mean, I mean, it could be kind of interesting, but it's going to have a bit of like a mismatch. So another thing is after evoking a certain read, you want to think about the center of focus or the hook. So basically what catches the viewer's attention. Clearly, I think that, for example, this guy, you're probably led to see this guy's beautiful pompadour right here because of how saturated it is. And, obviously just the rest of his upper body sort of frames it very well. So usually, I guess this wouldn't apply to every character, but I feel like a lot of characters that that you think of that have really good designs that usually have something that immediately draws their viewers' attention. So then afterwards, the silhouette, the shape language. I feel like that's basically just like kind of again, just knowing like how do you read. Obviously, can you identify this character with just one glance? So that way, especially when it comes to games, you kind of want to be able to kind of you have to identify them, especially if you have a bunch of these guys, right? How are you going to be able to tell like this character, sort of apart from like this character, right? So you want to make sure that from a gameplay standpoint that they would be able to read differently, especially if things are very fast paced, which I'll get into later. And then there's other two ones that I also saw, which I also feel also very important, which is big, medium, small rule, which is basically there's detail, there's rest, so don't overwhelm the viewer with a lot of details, and values, contrast, saturation. So these I would say are not as important as these few ones, but there's also like really nice things to have. But I'll say that the number one pillar of good character design is always design with a purpose. Okay, I'll get more into that later. So basically, now I'm gonna have so these are just some more examples of character designs that I feel sort of strike on all those pillars. This is from Indivisible, which is the same makers as Skullgirls. Of course, Guilty Gear. This is I specifically like XR. XR's designs better. I feel like they feel a little bit more. The silhouettes feel a lot more dynamic, and also I keep moving my mouse. I'm sorry. Overwatch. Wow. I'll be honest. Okay, obviously I know Overwatch right now is getting some bad rep, but you gotta admit the original cast is very like iconic, right? I mean, you got a gorilla who's very smart, and then you have like this femme fatale, like super mobile, like sniper character, right? Each character is like you can identify with a single glance. You probably don't even need to see the colors. You can just look at the way that they stand, and you can immediately tell like which character they are. So that's basically, I know those are all game character designs, but now I'm going to talk about what makes character design for games unique. So yeah, basically the main thing I would say is that there's a lot of, because games are interactive, it ends up coming with like a lot of other kind of additional restrictions when it comes to designing them, because you want to keep in mind that usually a lot of times when you design a character, it's going to be a player is going to be controlling them. So a lot of it has to do with like selling a certain fantasy, like what is the experience goal, right? From 488. But yeah, so basically like selling a certain fantasy. So you want to keep in mind what does the player want to feel. when they are playing this particular character. So now actually I'm also going to break it down to competitive genres and more like casual genres. And what I mean by that is that basically competitive games generally have different needs for character design compared to more casual games. Because when it comes to more competitive games, there's going to be a lot more like a need for characters to read more clearly, like I mentioned in one of the previous slides. So they need to be like readable because of how fast paced a lot of it, and how important it is for the characters or for the players to be able to read like the movements of their opponents and whatnot. Then there's more casual genres, which I feel like of course having like good readability is also important, but I would say it's more important. So what I mean casual is like some games that are more story related, games that are like single player games mostly. So basically a lot of times you want to also focus on relatability and evoking player emotions. Unfortunately, I don't know if I can really talk that much about casual games in this slideshow because I think my experience is more like competitive. But another thing again, yeah, so that's why I say gameplay is always key. It dictates the required focus areas of the character. And then also there's adapting to the in-game environment. So things like the perspective, poly count, rig. So in this so in these images, I just have like a picture of Garen and Teemo from League of Legends, and this kind of represents like how obviously Garen has one specific play style, right? He's like a big warrior dude who just jumps into battle and whatnot. So obviously like he's gonna play from just from looking at him, you could tell he's probably gonna play very differently from Teemo because Teemo does a lot more like freaking annoying guerrilla tactic kind of attacks onto the enemies. And then this picture here is also like because like so this is talking more about the in-game player perspective. So also like so apologies, like I'm gonna talk a lot more about like top-down kind of game design because that's what Fanes was. But basically for something like this, right, because the game's perspective is in top down, you want to be able to like be able to read like these types of elements on this is Darius from League of Legends, so you could tell like okay which things are going to stand out and which parts like are going to make the player be able to identify Darius when they see him in game. And so now I just have some examples of some competitive games. So as you can see, fighting games can be considered competitive because obviously you gotta when you're fighting against one other dude, you gotta be able to read those abilities before they do a nasty combo on you. Same with like some first-person shooters like Valorant. Sometimes you want to be fair, I would say that a lot of what makes competitive character designs like work is their VFX and other things like sound, which I mean I might go in a little bit into, but basically like you want to be able to predict things like and also for example, okay, so here is a lovely League of Legends example right here. So clearly you could tell there's a lot of craft going on. So you want to be able to tell like from the character silhouette, like this is Graga's, and so obviously like a character or a player should be able to tell like when they see this guy, they want to know like, oh, I better watch out for his beer barrel attack or something. So yeah, and then this is Omega Striker. So it's kind of like the same thing, right? Basically, you want to be able to identify what the characters are, and also how you could react to them, whether it's both like ally or enemy. And also, I would say in this side, like so, basically, when going back to like the kind of the visual elements and the narrative elements of character design that I explained in the one of the first few slides, I would say for competitive games, the shape and costume, so basically the visual elements are typically more important, because to be honest, most people don't really care about people who are playing these games like very seriously are probably not going to care that much about story or lore and stuff like that. So again, so visually, like yeah, shape and costume and all that are definitely more important. Comes to competitive games. Oh yeah, and also another point is also that for the experience goal of these competitive games, the player wants to feel like their character. They want to feel physically powerful. They want to feel strong. They want to be able to, like feel like they could defeat the other enemies, right? So that's another thing. And then yeah, so for casual games, or again, I wouldn't say casual, but more so that it's not like you're facing off against like other players. So for these guys, like typically like casual games rely on more of like a mix of like recognizability and also storytelling to sell their characters. So I'll say for these more casual games, memorability is the key factor. So in this case, casual games, like players want to basically feel like the character, they want to connect to them emotionally. So they want to relate to their goals. They want to be like sort of feel sympathetic towards them. So in this case, like for example, like The Last of Us, right? I mean, to be fair, in terms of visual character design, like it's not that special. Like Joel, I mean, they kind of look like Gmod characters or something, you know. So like the thing is like, but what makes their designs like more successful is obviously the story, because you know you can relate to their struggles as you play, and you know of course some games like of course like Ratchet and Clank or Shantae like have also like very recognizable characters, but I'll say that like you know it's something like again like the stories that really sort of drive their designs home. Of course, I would say that like you know shape, their visual elements are definitely important, but I would say that compared to competitive genres, story and personality are usually most important for these types of games. Um, Next slide. Okay, so this is kind of I'm going to basically talk about a bit about how like some character designs could work across like different, or could be basically be tweaked to work across like different genres of games. So for example, like these two ones on the left are more like Riot game sort of IPs. So the one on the top left is like one of the fighting games that they're making called like Project L or something. So generally for League of Legends, their character designs, like they're definitely going to be a lot more because like well I guess that like in League of Legends specifically, because it's top down, the designs are not made to be to be looked at up close. If you've ever been on like that website Timo.gg that allows you to look at all the 3D character models, they look really bad. Some of them look really bad because the poly count is super low, the textures like get warped all the time. But for a fighting game, because the characters are literally right in your face, you could you know look at them more close and you can see like all the more of the details and stuff, especially like towards the lower body. You definitely be able to tell there's more detail because again in top down it doesn't matter, and also because it's 5v5, you know, there's gonna be too much stuff going on, whereas for this it's like you definitely have a lot more because it's a fighting game, it's a different kind of genre. It's still competitive, but it is because it's a different genre, it could also be tweaked to work in that scenario. And this is like the upcoming Bando Tale, which is like based off like the yordles and stuff, and kind of like again you can see how like they've been tweaked. You know, same character design as Teemo, but you know it's set in like a different. More this one's actually more of a casual game, so you can see how it tweaks. You know, to still work in that setting because the color palette and like just the pixel art, because you know pixel art is super cozy. And then okay, so I wouldn't say a Spider-Man is actually he's not a character that's specifically made for games, but as you could tell, like the differences in terms of like, so that like, obviously in the Insomniac Spider-Man games, the player, you know, they want to feel like Spider-Man, right? They want to, you know, they want to like be able to swing, you know, from building to building, right? So basically the question is like, do you want to feel like Spider-Man, you know, taking part in this meaningful, like well-crafted Marvel story in next gen 4K, or do you want to like flex your anime variant Spider-Man while you know pull a silky smooth combo on your opponents in like Marvel Snap, right? So it depends on all about like the game's genre and what the players want, because you know obviously if you want to play a more like realistic like kind of Spider-Man story, you want to obviously have you know more of a photorealistic Spider-Man. And then if you play Marvel Snap, which is you know it's just illustrations, like oh of course you know why not have a chibi Spider-Man or you know something like that, right? So yeah, so that's kind of that talk, and then we're almost to the end of the information slides. I'm so okay. So this is kind of I'll just make this one kind of short, but basically this is me ranting about League of Legends. So you know the unique is not always better, because another thing about character design for games is that you also got to keep in mind, because it's a consumer product, that there is the painful truth that you know that like sometimes you have to kind of, cater to the masses, so to speak, when it comes to making your designs, because you want to sell video games. You don't want to make like a some design that, even though you might think is cool or unique, but sometimes the market trends says otherwise, right? So there was, ever wonder why Riot pretty much only makes cute or attractive champs these days, right? And then also because who constantly gets all the new skins, right? It's all the more attractive humanoid, looking characters and whatnot. So yeah, and then also there's like a chart there I found randomly, which is like unpopularity of monsters. So monsters are cool, like I don't know if any of you probably leaked, but basically like Aurelian Sol is this sick ass like star making dragon, but apparently he sucks in comparison to the the fox girl, the fox girl with 9 tails. So yeah, so anyways, this is more thing to keep in mind, that sometimes like, if you're gonna be working in games, sometimes you gotta think about kind of doing market research, sort of understanding what the players are attracted to. Also on the bottom right, if you don't know, that's those are 5 different characters from the same, like I think it's like some like Invictus Gaming 2018 championship skin, but yeah, those are they're you could Riot made those characters look like that for a reason. So yeah, basically humanoid characters feel more familiar in comparison to monsters and non-humanoids. So fortunately, player outreach and retention is everything. So that's probably what's going to drive a lot of those decisions. Also, it's just again me also kind of just crapping on Riot right now. See, yeah, this is where the money you guys are spending is going towards in RP sales, right? Saying not an invertebrate in sight. So yeah, so again, this is like some of the stuff that Riot's putting, a lot of investment towards. Like Hearthstone, I think came out just like a few months ago or something. So, again, like, and again, they chose characters that are humanoid and stuff, you don't see, I don't know, Vel'Koz or freaking Gragas in there or something. So again, character designs all too often fall victim to the influence of audience subjectivity. Okay, so now, anyways, moving on. So now we're going to talk about the actual character design process. So more bullet points. So I would say the general character design process could be boiled down to these few steps: research, ideation, iteration, and final. And I would say like that's a very general, like very simplified way of doing it. But basically, as you can see each of the descriptions, it's like you want to start off by setting these character parameters, which I'm about to go into in the next slide. Brainstorming, gathering reference, ideation, right, which is exploring different thematic sort of directions. So you're going to do a lot more big changes in this stage because it's more early. Iteration is a bit more of a focused kind of so you're making smaller changes. It's honing in, gonna finalize design, and then you have the final, which is basically I won't say rendering is always needed, but basically it's like ready to be passed off to the character artist. Because this is more like, I guess this is more from like a concept artist kind of point of view, where character design, concept art kind of like go hand in hand, and then also extras if they're needed, anything else that helps sell the character. So let's talk about an actual character now. That I worked on. Actually, technically it's not a character, but you'll see what I mean. So yeah, so here is kind of the example of like a research stage. So you want to break down so actually the first step is like breaking down a brief. So sometimes you're not going to be, or in fact, a lot of times you're not going to be, if you're working in the games or whatever, you're not going to be the one who's writing the brief. Like it's not going to always be determined by you. And sometimes these could range from being very simple, right, to very complex. So so basically so remember again, visual narrative elements, those are some things that you want to sort of take from it. So a lot of the times the brief could be like a description of the character, right? Like in here, this is like honor exe, whatever that means. Basically, I don't know if you can even read that, but basically there's a bit of like a brief there that kind of is like giving a kind of like flavor text. And from there, you want to break down the gameplay, the visual, and the narrative elements that you receive from there, which will then inform your decisions on the research that you do. So gameplay, okay, yeah. So specifically in games, right, there's going to be gameplay elements that you also want to take into consideration, because sometimes you're like, okay, we want this character to be like a melee bruiser or something, and that's something you want to keep in mind as well, because again, gameplay is key. And then, yeah, again, remember, design with a purpose, right? Who is the target audience, right? Yeah, so that's the thing. It's like sometimes, again, taking the brief and then breaking them down, so you know where to go from there. And then, so yeah, reference gathering. So I'll go into more into that in the next slide. But basically, there also I want to give you guys little tips also as well on some types of references you want to collect. So there's thematic references, design references, style references, and technical references. I won't say you need all four of them, but I found that those if you have all four of those types of groups of references, different types of references, then you're gonna make a you're gonna be pretty well prepared, I guess. Yeah, and also you can never have too much reference. That's what my coworker told me, and he had a pure ref that was like the Bible basically. So yeah, so again, I was just talking about pure ref. So sometimes you want to make a mood board or reference boards and try setting multiple initial themes. So these are just like a couple ideas that I put together, or a couple boards that I put together. So like you can tell it's more like streetwear, cyberpunk, kind of, and also on the right side you have like this weird like metallic kind of almost augmentation kind of look to it. So yeah, those are kind of this is kind of where you want to start out. So, and then I'm going to break down, I'll make this one a bit quick, but basically types of references. So basically for the theme, right, it's basically, I'll say these are references that are meant to capture a solid idea of like the basic elements that will make up the design. So these, I would say these are more like you want to use real life photographs or like some caricature or something. So basically the first thought that comes to mind when you imagine like, okay, I'm going to make a cyberpunk, evil robot lady. So you're like, okay, well, I have cyberpunk references or techwear references. You want to get a lot of that. Then for the next type of reference, design. So these are references from other media or artists that could convey a similar idea to an extent. Because sometimes like the Sombra skin is kind of like, oh, that's like kind of a pretty cool reference I could use as well. It's kind of similar to what I'm going for. So like this, yeah, it's like Sombra's like cyber thing design skin or whatever. So yeah, again, for these you could look at similar character designs or more like some other interesting ideas. And then there's style. So this one I feel like is a little underrated because these are, well, I describe as things you want to push to convey a certain overall feel. So sometimes it can overlap with design, but some of these like, if you find like if you go on Pinterest or whatever, look at like some like photographs or something like macro photography or something like that, you can find some really cool like shape language or like silhouette breaks or like other interesting design motifs. So like I don't know what the heck that is. That guy's wearing some weird fashion thing. I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool, So it's like almost like they're like glitching out or something. And then the last type of reference is like technical references. So these are like things that help you draw like forms accurately and correctly. So like on the all around the right, like if I wanted to make a robot arm, I'm not gonna obviously draw that, but that's just an example of like, okay, well, make sure the robot arm kind of makes sense. That's not like the moving parts aren't gonna like mess up each other in their actual design. So these are things like fundamentals or mechanical elements, armor breakdowns, clothing folds, anatomy, pose reference, a whole bunch of different stuff. So now let's go on to the ideation stage. These slides are gonna go pretty quick. But basically, so these are, you gotta do a lot of ideation. That's kind of like the a bunch of different I would say some of these are kind of like similar ideas, but basically you just want to cast a wide net. You want to explore a bunch of different directions. At this point, you don't want to fuss over a lot of detail. I know this is not a very great example of like not fussing over details, but you could see like, okay, you're not putting in you're not putting in any color. If anything, you're putting in grayscale. And just at this point, like if you're working with your art director, feedback is going to be pretty hard here because it's like you're really trying to like slash and burn like stuff that doesn't work and then keep stuff that does work. So you want to make a lot of notes and whatnot. Iteration stage. So here at this point the direction has kind of been locked in, so we're like, okay, we really like this design with like some cyber virus growing out of their body. So at this point you want to play around with like some details. You could do some more coloring, right? But you're getting close to the final, so you're starting to lock in more direction and just really you're basically almost there, right? So you could start making more smaller changes. And then there is like the final, which so a lot of times you're gonna be doing like an orthographic turnaround sheet, right, for the reference. Because well, because it depends on sometimes the games, but basically like for 3D game, like what this was for, you want to basically forgot to write on there, but basically you want to have a lot of communication with the 3D artist or whoever you're going to hand it off to, because you want to make sure that they have as much information as possible, and if they have any questions, you gotta be able to answer them. So yeah, and then sometimes if you want to render it out in in-game perspective, it's I won't say it's very important, but it's very useful for competitive games because if you want to if the game you don't want to like again realize that you can make this cool design and realize when you actually put it in from the perspective of a game that's gonna like look really bad or something. So so this is kind of like a final kind of hand-in sheet that I did, except for those things at the top bottom left. But yeah, that's kind of the basic idea. And some examples of extras that you might kind of run into are like a material reference sheet. So for this, like, okay, 3D artists, yeah, they will praise you for this because it's like, especially if you're not going to render out the stuff yourself. And now, to be honest, I would say maybe like there's not really a lot of need to like reference or to render out like super accurately, because when you hand it off to artists, they're just gonna like use their trickery or witchcraft to put textures and whatnot on it. So for here, you could again add some references on like how you imagine each of the materials to look like. And sometimes like you could put like real life references as the materials, but a lot of times again it goes back to depending on what the style of the game is. So I took a lot of like hand painted references from a lot of these are from like League, because League is just the most hand painted thing. So and then sometimes you also want to go for color variants. So this is like not I'll say at the end it's not like necessary for like every case, but sometimes like this was a skin, okay? So like so it's basically based off of like another existing character. So if we're like, oh yeah, character people might want to have different options when it comes to the colors, so you could give them that option as well. And also some more extras. So these are not for this previous character for this design, but basically there's some VFX concepts. So these are pretty underrated, I would say. A VFX reference of VFX concepts are like could be really helpful for again the VFX artists to go in and like use those in the work, because a lot of times, specifically for like a lot of games or competitive games, there's gonna be a lot of VFX, a lot of abilities you could do. So like having things like VFX reference would be really would be really helpful, and also it just shows to the like potentially if you're going to be like, going to like applying for jobs or whatever, it's gonna show the recruiters and art directors and whatnot that you're aware of like all the parts that make up a character, and be able to push their again the character's fantasy. Okay, and then the next slide. What the heck? Oh yeah, basically I was just a lot of variety of stuff that I've done. There's gonna be a lot of different themes or whatever, could be going from like this fiery fantasy Polynesian fire spirit to like a mecha thing, mecha a mecha eagle robot into like it's just like definitely just showing a lot of variety, and like each of these had again went through the same process. There's another one as well, I forgot. Oh, whoops. Oh yeah, that's definitely not a cosmic skin from League. Yeah, so that's for skins. For an actual character, I'm gonna go through this way faster because I already talked about all this. So for an actual character, so lots of research. Okay, so this is like a character I made for the game as well, which is so basically unfortunately I don't have the original brief because I don't know, somehow disappeared. But basically, these are like some of kind of like a bit of a sample brief for what this character was. So the gameplay is that they use ink magic. to fight. Visual elements, kind of East Asian inspired motifs. The narrative is that they are rebellious, don't give a fuck attitude. So yeah, so I'm just gonna walk you guys through this as well. So for this, there's a lot of, again, ideation, whatnot. Don't put in any colors and stuff. Honestly, don't even go as detailed as this for another one designs I'm going to show. It is nowhere near as detailed. But these are just, again, some ideation, trying different directions and whatnot. Then here we have some iteration. Again, you kind of like honing in on direction here, and then some more iteration and some more and some more. So yeah, for weapons, don't forget about weapons as well, and other props. Those things also need iteration as well, and other design stuff. And then the final, of course, we have our beautiful turnaround sheet. And it definitely went through a lot of changes. And like the thing is, this is like not what I if I was being honest with you, there was definitely still a lot of changes I would do, but it was kind of like you gotta listen to your art director, and this is like they were like, hell yeah. So I was like, okay, great. So yeah. So again, oh, I totally forgot to mention about like stuff like basically like so this is again still from top down point of view. So things like the hair being on the top being very saturated and whatnot, it's gonna catch the viewer's attention. The pot of ink, that's supposed to be a pot of ink on the back, is meant to kind of also read pretty clearly in the in-game angle. And yeah, so again, remember to keep those in mind. And some extras you could potentially do is like sometimes you want to explore some personality, right? Just because you work on a competitive game doesn't mean that you want the characters to be like soulless husks, right? So these I didn't do these. This is by my co-worker Michael Marino. So again, I want to say you need this for every competitive game, but sometimes you want to do that kind of stuff. And I'll say for more casual genres, like where it's more story-based stuff, studies like these will probably be more important. All right, and then we are on to our last few steps. You guys want one more?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, thank you. One more. Yeah, this is okay. We are almost at time, but
Yeah, you're almost
yeah.
done. At the end, I don't think it's easier after this.
Okay, so again, lots of research. So this one again, very simple, brief, very close range, melee attacks, visual, non-human, perhaps robotic, and narrative is all smash. So yeah, so again, this is again very basic. I don't have the original prompting again, but yeah, these are the PureRef board again. PureRef is amazing. Should always use it. Okay, so here is I guess a bit of a better example of how loose you want to be with the ideation. So here, like, okay, these are just like, I don't know what the heck I was doing here, but basically, thumbnails, I forgot to mention thumbnails are a very important thing. These really help you to get out a lot of ideas very fast, very efficiently. So like, again, these are just, again, just showing the different ways that you could ideate. You could use silhouettes, you could use no lines at all. But I prefer a line art, that's just how I work. Yeah, and then just keep going through these as well. Some more ideation, robots, humanoid stuff, more robot, and also like I wrote like these little like kind of flavor text up here for some reason for some of these. Yeah, so some more ideation. So yeah, this one was particularly brutal. So basically, again, another thing to kind of point out is any step of the character design process can be as much longer than the rest. So previously for the other one, the ideation step wasn't that long, but this one was a lot. Sometimes you have to, exhaust like every option available until you come up with the right one. So this one. Okay, so here we finally were like, maybe we want to go for this robot guy with like a mutton chop kind of thing with his robot face. So, these are kind of like, we're starting to hone in on the design again. And then we're like, okay, we'll make some more changes. And this is kind of where we end up with. But here we go to the final. Oh, where's the final? So actually, so this one never got finished in the end. So So that's just like a little point here is that sometimes it happens, sometimes things get scrapped in this world, even though you have a lot of like attachment to it or whatever, sometimes it happens. Yeah, it's just unfortunate that never got done. Oh, but wait, actually, there is actually a final. Okay, so here's the thing. I forgot. I I forgot it actually did technically finished. But I put that previous slide in there just because I thought it carried at least some sort of message. But basically, like, okay, so basically it did get finished, but it wasn't by me. Okay, it was by my wonderful colleague Michael Marino. So there it is in all its beauty. So this is again another kind of lesson where it's like sometimes dream work makes the team work. Okay, I mean, no, teamwork makes the dream work. Okay, so again, it's a team effort. He was Michael Marino. He was my manager. So like the thing is, we worked all together a ton, and even though like I kind of went through most of like the whole process. He sometimes helped, pitched in. And the thing is, he was the reason why he kind of stepped in was because he actually had like a kind of industrial like design sort of background. So he actually knew how to make a robot compared to my small brain. So like, so that's the thing. So he took over. So it's very just like, again, making games, making characters for games is like all team effort. And then extras. So these are I actually didn't make these. So basically, again, for stuff like robots, sometimes you want to articulate some like moving parts and whatnot. That was just like some like explorations on like how this can kind of work, and then I did like a thing where I was telling about what kind of joints this guy was gonna have. So yeah, so again, another thing that you might want to add in depending on what kind of character you're making. And now it's the final slide. So being a successful game character designer, I'm not saying I'm a successful designer right now, but from what I've heard from like again some of my like the veterans, I guess like Michael Marino that I've worked with before, these are some of the things that they talked about was so again, always design with a purpose in mind. Be multifaceted. I would say you need to be multifaceted. Like if you're very good at one thing, then might as well, I mean, stick with it. But if you could do stuff like VFX, animation concepts, you'll be a lot more valuable. People are gonna, and also like maybe if you even have a little bit of 3D knowledge, that could also be really helpful as well. Another thing is be familiar with the general artistic pipeline. So I didn't talk about any of that, unfortunately, or not really much of that. Like in this presentation, but basically, again, being reliable, knowing like what comes next or what other people need, right? So basically being communicative and aware of the needs of your colleagues, especially those further down the pipeline. So this character artist, like you're gonna work really, really close to them. And then also, yeah, never lose your creative juices, right? Cite your team, citing design is almost always a good one, right? So yeah, and also, yeah, also have fun yourself, again, but that's that. And thanks for tuning in. Any questions? Yeah.
So I was wondering if you had like any tips for like finding and like searching for like obscure or like specific aesthetics when you're trying to like get references for your
Certain aesthetics. Huh. What do you mean by certain aesthetics? Like, do you mean like searching up for images, like reference images, or more so like trying to like
remember the slide that you had with like the guy with like the suit that was all like fractured and
yeah,
stuff?
yeah.
What do you do to find
Oh, okay. So for like those style references. So yeah, so a lot of times like they yeah, that is actually a pretty good question. I feel like some of those like they come up just from me just browsing around. Like they kind of like when I'm looking for specific like, design stuff. And when it's like it's mostly like, those like the kind of references that like you feel like are too extreme or something to really use as like an actual like one-to-one sort of reference, but still stuff that you're like has a cool like feeling, So that's not like I wouldn't say that's a great answer for me, but like um yeah, but that's kind of like the idea is like it kind of happens as I'm just looking for like the other few types of references. But sometimes like I would say like maybe like for example, if you're making like a design that's more organic, then looking at a lot of images of nature and whatnot, or something that just if you just type in the theme of like cyberpunk or like virus or whatever, you could probably find stuff like that. Stuff that like, you don't think is like, okay, I'm not gonna directly take a picture of a tree or something and like put it like directly on the design, but more so like I'm gonna look at the tree and like feel its like the energy it sort of conveys and try to put it into the design. If that makes sense.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah. So
So like for the current deck card you mentioned, these games were like carded deck is separately into like the visual and the character side. And later when you mentioned all these examples of the carded visual games, so I noticed that most of these versions they only apply to like the visual side. I feel like
yeah.
so it's possible for the narrative side of certain design to change as well in these situations, or is there better that's common?
The narrative, like it depends, because like some things like some things like gameplay elements cannot change. But narrative sometimes I would say again, it depends on the type of game you're making. So for competitive games, so like all the examples I showed were me making stuff for competitive games. So in the end, like the narrative elements, sometimes they got pushed around a bit, but it depends. Yeah, again, it depends on what type of game you're making. So for like the casual games, like or very heavily story-based games, you want to stick with like the story element or the the narrative elements for sure.
Like the character setting, they will also keep alongside the visual and I don't think also like really push on that.
Yeah. At the end, like again, to be fair, it didn't really matter. Like if the narrative parts like felt like I think were communicated correctly in these designs. So it was a lot more loose, but sometimes it's good to just have them for like a certain, just so you know like what direction you're going in. Yeah. Sophie.
What is your favorite character that you've done? I know you have a personal favorite, right?
Okay, so I actually originally had a slide here that I decided to hide because I was like, it kind of didn't feel like it fit, but let me see. Please. Full screen? Question mark? Oh, there it is. God damn it, where's my mouse? There it is. Yeah, there's a lot of slides here and it's lagging like hell. Okay, well basically, oh yes, this guy right here. Okay, so actually, hold on, let me delete these for a second. Okay, the reason why I have those stuff on there, okay, so it's basically, I guess it would be this guy. Or maybe, actually, I don't know, he's one of the favorite, probably not my favorite, but basically like, he's like this, okay, like, he's like this, this guy who protects nature with his big sword that's not in the frame, but yeah, the idea is like, I felt I connected with this guy because it's a bit of a long story to be honest, but yeah, like I'll say this guy's definitely one of my favorites. And yes, he was voiced by English Denji. Also I really like this one right here that I made as well. But I mean that's this for this game, but like I would say like any of the designs that I've made for my own personal stuff on personal projects, so like I'm pretty happy with them as well. So yeah, cool question, Roosevelt.
In like your experience as a professional, like how much will the character design change from like the concept art, like the finalized concept art to like the finalized product?
Sometimes a lot. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I still have the liberty of time here, but there's like a lot of stuff that has. I'll just explain it. But basically, like, yeah, it definitely does happen a lot. Like sometimes, especially with our game, we ended up doing a thing where we updated like some old designs and stuff like that because the pipeline of our game, like it went like maybe like 3-4 years in terms of like the whole production pipeline, and sometimes they could definitely change a lot because you might have different needs. You might like want to change the character's like entire gameplay or something like that, and you think like the current design like of the character doesn't reflect that. But in terms of just like the general like from my like from just a single like process like from a character design, yeah, sometimes it could change a lot because also especially for like 3D games, you might realized when they're making the model for the characters that like some things like if they had like a cape or something, it might clip into the body. Like this is funny example of like this guy who looked really sick on paper on a concept, but when he like was in the 3D model, it made no sense like how this guy like he had like this thing around his neck, right? And it's very hard to explain, but basically like yeah, it clipped into his head all the time. So they had to get rid of it. It looked like I don't know, it looked kind of like a like it was like a Venus fly. It looked like a Venus flytrap, like kind of thing, you know. So yeah, like a lot of times, yeah, it could happen, but generally though, like yeah, it you know, depending on who calls the shots, right, at the end, you know, sometimes things could end up being like, um, you know, like yeah, I would say like yeah, it really kind of happens randomly. So yeah. William.
How did you end up in the industry as like high school? Wait, yeah, when did you enter the industry?
Oh, it was like I guess it was like in high school. Like I'm not even joking. Like it's through Reddit.
Really?
Yeah, it was through Reddit, dude. Like there's so many people out there who are like specifically like there's certain like Reddit subs that are like, oh yeah, like I don't know how it is now because I feel like it might be oversaturated with like stupid like AI stuff. But before like maybe you could check it out. It's like there's some subs like r/game dev or like r/ like it's like INAT, which is like I need a team. And sometimes they're just like people posting stuff out there like, hey, yeah, I want you want like a game together or something. And usually like a lot of times like you don't like really you know, they don't really amount too much. But sometimes like to be honest, I consider myself like kind of lucky that I ended up working with some people and actually like shipping a game because a lot of times that doesn't happen. But yeah, like a lot of times like it's just like it did as like a hobby at first, and then I kind of just built myself up like that, you know. Just yeah, again, like building yourself up and continuing to do like building your portfolio, and then from there, like you know, maybe you could qualify for bigger stuff, you know, in the future. But yeah, it's just like starting small, I guess, is how I ended up there. But yeah. Any other questions? I think we are definitely above time now.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. I was like, I don't think anyone's gonna finish.
All right. Thank you. Okay, I guess.
Yeah, the meeting for all.